Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting live stream from AtPace, where we speak to experts from around the world and pick their brains on their area of expertise. Today, I am really pleased to have Andrea Miller. So I'm just going to give you a quick introduction of who she is, and I might be out of breath at the end because it's a lot. So Andrea is the CEO of a company called The Wealthy Leader. She's an executive and leadership coach. She's also a learning and development consultant. She's been recognized nationally in the United States as well as around the world as an expert in patient experience, caregiving, and well-being. She's worked with a number of marquee brands, including Siemens Healthineers, the World Health Organization, UNAIDS, UN Refugee Agency, the CDC, and a number of other health startups. Her work has been published in the United Nations, entrepreneur.com, Thrive Global, and many platforms, which is where I first got to know her through the work that she was doing there. She is a master's in international and intercultural management from the School of International Training, completed her postgraduate studies in the University of Pennsylvania, and she is an ICF certified coach in exec and leadership and career coaching. She also does a lot of functional medicine health coaching, and she is a emotional intelligence practitioner. Wow, Andrea, welcome. What a pleasure to have you on this livecast.
Hi, Ravi. Well, thank you so much. It's really such a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited about this opportunity.
You see, I told you I would be out of breath, and I am. So
I didn't need to put quite as much as I did down, but just trying to let your viewers know who I am. So
awesome. And we are super pleased that you took time, especially late in the evening, to do this for us. So let me start by maybe asking you about mental wellness and resilience, which is the core area of your expertise. Could you share some trends on what you're seeing in that space?
Well, we had a brief moment to speak before I got on this, Ravi, and I had just seen some really kind of startling data around what's going on in terms of the mental health and well-being space. This was an article by Josh Bersin, who's just leading the way in this space. And he noted that 25% of workers, this is in the US, the first part of the data, under 30 are on meds for depression or anxiety. 39% had experienced either one of the other in the last 4 weeks. And then globally, MRSA, who does a lot of work around employment and well-being, they noted that 81% globally are at risk for burnout. And that's up from 63% in 2020. So it was kind of shocking, even though, we're all aware just how things have been going, particularly in the last few years. But I think the biggest trend that I'm seeing is more a trend towards a more holistic perspective by companies in terms of how they treat their employees and how they're addressing some of these issues. And what I thought I would break it down for you is in kind of the what, the how, and the why. And the what is kind of those functional areas that they're looking at, because well-being isn't just health and fitness anymore. That's what they used to look at. But now they're looking at other things like the financial piece, family and connectivity, and as we talked about, the mental health and resilience. And then the how is kind of platforms like yours, just how do you connect people? Been noticing a real switch to lifestyle savings accounts so people can make their own decisions. And then there's also the apps and everything else, just to find ways to give people the resources they need. And then finally is the why. COVID and the uncertainty around the recession and everything else has just left people in a really traumatized state, as well as, those levels of burnout, because there's just too much work for people to get done, particularly under the circumstances.
I think that's a very comprehensive, let's say, introduction to the conversations we're going to have. I'm really surprised by the spike in the data. And you were right when you were making that observation earlier, that data is really shocking to the extent that if you've got a 20-point increase from 60 to 80 odd %, that they are vulnerable to, let's say, burnout, that's a lot. Could you just break that down a little bit more for us if you've got some more data on, especially the causes of it, and do you see geographical differences?
I don't have the breakout because literally I saw the article right before I got onto the podcast. But, some of the things that they reference are not surprising. It is that uncertainty piece, because for the human brain, uncertainty is even more difficult than knowing. So if you know a bad outcome, you feel less anxious because you know what's going to happen. But when you're uncertain, our lizard brains, our brain's limbic system just kind of goes on high alert. And we have that negativity bias and we just kind of catastrophize. So there's a piece of that. A lot of it also is the demands of work, that always on state that we're in, because like you and I right now, we're on video and it is 7:40 at night for me. And, this is my choice. So it's great. I have no problems with it. But for a lot of workers, it isn't their choice, or, the demands of home are also impeding upon the demands of work. So their days just become so incredibly long that there aren't the boundaries. They're not getting the rest they need. They're not taking care of themselves in the way they need to. And everything is just overflowing into everything else.
That's true. I think you're right to say that. I want to go back to your point about the lizard brain. And I was reading this book called Burnout, in which these authors really speak about how we have to deal with two things in order for us to complete the cycle. So they talk about the stress cycle, right? And there are two things that you need to do to complete the stress cycle. One, you need to deal with the stressor and remove the stressor. And then you need to tell your body that it's okay to relax. Because unless and until you do the two things, your stress cycle is not complete. So one of the challenges that we have, that you just highlighted, and which goes back to the work that I was reading in the book as well, is most of the time we are able to deal with the stressor. So it's a difficult presentation or a difficult conversation or a meeting, and we say, yes, we're going to get through this. But we don't have enough time to reset and close the cycle. As a consequence, we are constantly pushing our systems into that state of continuously pumping adrenaline, fight-flight responses, and we are wrecking our own well-being in that sense. So a lot of what we are facing is exactly not able to complete the cycle. And you're right, it just meshes into each other. So you're going from an email to a tweet to a Slack to dealing with the kids to then being able to order food or able to cook food, then take care of your probably parents, and then you're back again into the Slack and messaging. And that's crazy. I mean, the amount of work or the amount of adrenaline that we are pumping into the system is just too much to deal with. What kind of trends are you seeing in the way that people are dealing with this burnout? Do you have some great stories that you can tell us on your personal experiences?
Well, I mean, I can talk about my own personal experience. As you know, Robbie, I had my own former burnout a number of years ago. I was working with the UN, and I wasn't burnt out from that per se, but I wound up quitting because of my mother's illness. And then I moved back to New York and had all these stressors because of my own personal health, working, and dealing with my mother's end of life crisis. And I think it's not unusual for people to be going through all this now too. We have people who have aging parents, who have young children, who have all these different pieces that are coming at the same time. And for me, it was really a matter of being forced, quite honestly. My own health gave way. So it was being forced to really take a step back and really take care of just the fundamentals, which I think is harder for some people now, unequivocally, given our digital life. But eating, moving, sleeping, how do you take care of the things that really set you up for less stress, less cortisol, a better ability to adapt? And most of us, because it's become a cycle, as you said, that loop is never closed. So we're always on, we're never taking the time to really get adequate rest. We're usually not eating well, we're not getting exercise because we're always concerned about, how much work we have to do. And, I like to talk in my practice about energy management as opposed to time management, because if we don't have the energy to do the work, which, the statistics around lack of sleep and what that does to us, physically, emotionally, is just kind of horrifying. So, I think really we could start with the basics, and people would be so much better off if they just were able to do that. But it also takes some cooperation from their companies. There has to be a point when it's enough, when you can turn off your computer and say it's okay, and just handle the day to day.
Yeah. I really like the way that you've reframed the aspect about not managing time, but really managing energy. Because the resilience practice is pretty much around that particular concept, isn't it? So maybe you could talk to a little bit about to our viewers around the resilience practice and how you can, some guidelines or tips that you can give them around what they can do in that practice, or at least some of the basics that they really need to check off to be able to say, yes, I'm doing a decent job. Maybe we could start with some basics and we'll go from there. How's that?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. And I'm just smiling a little bit because I just did an article in my newsletter this week.
I saw that. That is awesome.
Resilience, using music actually to kind of calm yourself down, reset, anchor. Again, I'll return to just first getting those fundamentals right. Being able to manage your own health, well-being. Breath work is critical. Making time to meditate. And one of the things I tell people is, just fit it in. It doesn't have to be this big, onerous practice. One of my clients, he's planning on starting his meetings, with his team, taking the first 5 minutes and just doing a meditation practice together. But it's really finding ways to fit in these moments where you slow down, where you take a breath, and just being able to reset, to anchor. Because if you're always, as you said, not closing that loop, always having that rush of cortisol, you won't be able to be resilient because you're too worn down. So it really is a matter of just having those moments of reset and also paying attention. If you're feeling like, your stress levels are too high, if you're feeling like you're hangry, just haven't eaten, not getting enough sleep, pay attention. What your body tells you. Really, your body is one of the best metrics you have for how you're feeling. And it's one of the easiest ways to build up your resistance, because when you're fully charged, you're more resilient.
That's a great one. I think the two things which really resonate personally with me is the 3 a.m. wake-ups. And this is what is your classic cortisol hit that gets you at 3 in the morning, and then your brain's wide open, and you're like, oh, right, now I need to sleep because I've got this 6 a.m. thing. But yeah, your system's gone into that high gear most likely because of high degrees of either anxiety or not being able to close the day or things like that, because something's out there which is just pushing. A lot of my coaches that I work with are also contending with this. They say they have this 3 a.m., 4 a.m., sort of.
Yeah.
Could you talk to that? I mean, because I'm pretty sure there is a lot of wealth of information that we can use, or tips that we can use to deal with that. So
there's a number of things. Well, one of the things that one of my favorite podcasters talks about, the Huberman Lab, he talks about really getting your biorhythms right. So getting that immediate sunlight when you wake up. So it's really setting yourself up for the day so that, your body knows when to be awake and when to be asleep. Turning off that computer at night, not doing the doom scrolling, not, having that brain going. Another thing is a data dump before you go to sleep. Journal, get whatever's in your mind that might be waking you up out. So, those are some of the things. If you wake up at 3 a.m., there's also a program called Non-Sleep Deep Rest, which is a form of meditation. So just to kind of calm yourself down. Because you get into that spin cycle. If you wake up at 3, you just think, oh, I'm up. How am I going to get back to sleep? I need to get back to sleep. So the question is, how can you calm down? Taking those breaths. Yeah.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I have to say that 2 out of the 3 actually work very well for me. So one, before you close the day or before you hit the bed, take some time to reflect and either vocalize and I used to do that sometimes with my wife, and sometimes I would just write. So that really helps you to bring a closure to your work day or your sort of day per se, and say, hey, whatever's left out, it's all right. I'll deal with it tomorrow morning. It'll still be there, but I need my rest. So I think that's one piece. That did solve some of it, but I still had moments when I used to wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and I'll get these crazy hits, cortisol. So the second thing which you said has also helped, which is the breathing. And that's really helpful. And using of certain music has helped me to also calm down. It didn't work very well when I had YouTube videos that also showed graphics. So what I did was, even on our YouTube platform, at the At Pace YouTube platform, we've got these meditation videos because I'm a huge fan of those. We run them, and you can run them. They run for about an hour each. So you can just turn them on and just let them run. The thing that didn't work for me was the fact that there were images. So I had to make a conscious effort to keep the images to the side and just let the sounds pipe in, and then try and adjust my breathing. Now, you speak a lot about music in your latest newsletter as a way to manage that. Could you give us some tips on, what advice would you give to people who are just trying this out? Are there some really nice ones that they can look at or things like that?
Well, the thing that came to mind when you were speaking, if we're talking strictly about sleep, there's two things. I use Insight Timer, and they have, different sleep meditations, and it's all audio, so it's not that issue with the video as you talked about. And there's another app that I haven't used myself, but I'm tempted to. It's called Reverie, and it's done by, I think he's a Stanford psychologist, and it's a form of hypnosis, a meditation hypnosis, and it's based on science, and supposedly he's gotten a lot of very good results. So that might be something else for your viewers to pay attention to download.
Okay, so that's Reverie and as well as
Insight Timer. They have a wonderful
Timer
selection of sleep-based meditations and music and a variety of things, and those are free.
I want to shift your attention a little bit to the broader wellness space. So not just sleep, but also more like nutrition and resilience and things like that. What kind of trends are you seeing with this return to hybrid model, and in some companies pushing employees to be in the office for certain periods of time? What kind of general wellness trends are you seeing? You spoke a little bit about the data, but are there other things that companies should look at or employees should consider?
Well, I mean, the biggest trend around the hybrid workspaces and people pushing people to go back to work or people quitting. But I think one of the things that I really have been noticing too, because there is a lack of connection. People are really, and this is more, I think, a bit towards the career side too, for your younger viewers, how do you connect? How do you form those relationships? Because one of the pieces that came out of COVID that was so unique to it and so difficult for people is loneliness, which I think the researchers have equivocated it to 15 cigarettes a day or something.
Wow.
Completely outrageous, but it is a killer. Loneliness is really difficult for all of us, and how do you make those connections? And so there's a lot of move towards a lot of these platforms in terms of gamification and collaboration, and how do you interact with others. So there's a big piece towards that, and there's even, some of the companies are turning towards nutrition. How do you support your staff's nutrition? And some of that, depending on how much money they're putting towards it, is actually, food and ways to eat better and make it easier for people to eat better. There's all sorts of different things coming up. I did find the LSAs, those lifestyle accounts that savings accounts, which people can choose what they need within the parameters, because we're all different. And I think it's important to realize that it's not one size fits all when you're talking about well-being. So I think that's kind of an interesting trend too.
Yeah, I think I really like the two things that you said. One is the fact that a lot of our young listeners who are probably just stepping into the corporate world or have been there for maybe a year or two since the beginning of the pandemic have really not experienced connection. And I think that connection piece is a very key part of what companies are also trying to orchestrate as a comeback to work experience. So I see some of the more progressive ones are really focusing on the back to work experience and not just about let's come back to work because we need to see that you're working. I've got those set of, let's say, perspectives as well from some of the work that I'm doing, that people are saying, oh, we want our teams back because we want to be sure that they're working. And my question back to them was, even when they were sitting right in front of you, how do you know they were working? And I think most of them don't have an answer for it. So I think they really need to think about the experience and the outcomes as two sort of complementary pieces, not just make it about, oh, we are resetting, we're going back to the way it was. Fortunately, we can never go back to the way it was. And I think we need to chart a path forward. So I think this has been quite exciting for me to hear from you on those tips. Do you have any upskilling or areas of tips that you would like to offer to our listeners on how they can make self-care a priority? Are there 2 or 3 areas that you really want them to focus on?
Well, I think the number one area is sleep. Unquestionably, you have to get that right, because if you don't get enough sleep, it's the equivalent of being drunk. I think it's 0.05. It's the equivalent of having a certain level of alcohol in your system. Your ability to focus, concentrate, be creative, be innovative. And I know personally my irritability factor goes up, which, I think is critical when you're in an office, how well you can interact with your colleagues. But that would be my first line of defense, is really getting them to really make it a priority to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, depending on what their needs are. That is number one. I'd say breathing is super critical in terms of being able to manage their stress. And within that, not being afraid to ask for help. If you're having some mental health issues, if you're just feeling like something's not right, finding someone to talk to, whether it be a friend, a counselor, your boss, whoever it is that you trust, that you feel safe with, but asking for the support you need. I think that is really, I can't say that enough. I know there's some stigma around it still, but with all the online tools, all the platforms, it can be a much more private thing. But if you need help, ask for it. I know it's hard, but it's important. Those are the 2 most critical. Nutrition is obviously so important. How you feed yourself, how you nourish yourself is how you're going to show up during the day, and it impacts your health on so many levels. So I put that in there too. That's probably the trifecta, right? Sleep, nutrition, and wellness in terms of being able to take care and ask for help and support. This is an amazing sort of combination. If you get that balance right between being able to eat well, sleep properly, and still be mindful of where you are and ask for help when you need to and get the help you need, I think that can really change the overall energy management that you're going through, that you speak about. I want to share a story, and then I would probably ask you to just comment on it. Last week, I was in conversations with a very senior leader, and they were speaking about, Ravi, I'm having trouble managing the performance of one of my employees. And the person just doesn't show up as the way that we want them to, does not meet the objectives and so on. And the minute we try and push the person, we get this whole mental wellness, sort of flag that the person raises. So how do you want, or what kind of coaching can you provide to me to help me manage this kind of a difficult employee? And I listened to the person and I thought, what can I tell this person? So my first question back was, tell me, what did your HR team say? And he said something about what the HR team has said. And my question was, how do you feel about that? And he said, I want to manage the performance because for me, that's crucial. And I said, okay, I get it. We are all measured by performance. Can you just take that hat off for a second? Put on your human hat. How would you want somebody to respond to you if you were struggling? Some of my favorite questions. Yeah.
Right. And I just saw the bulb go on and the person just went quiet. What advice would you give line managers or to leaders who are really pushing for performance and companies who are really wanting to transform themselves through this recession on how they can find the balance between performance and wellness?
Yeah, no, you had mentioned it before. You talked about that complement. There is no performance without well-being. If you're not feeling your best, you can't bring your best. There's just absolutely no question. And I just want to say, I love that question. It's one of my favorites, the one you asked him. We're not hardwired to be our own best friends. We don't see ourselves well, but when it comes to other people, if we are able to kind of take a step for that reflection piece, it really, we talked about this a little bit before the show, that emotional intelligence piece, really having that self-awareness so that you can have the awareness of what the other is going through. So if this person is having mental health issues, if this person is having well-being issues, how do you support them so they're able to come in and perform at their peak? And when you do that, when you set your company up that way, when you set your employees up that way, when you really care about them, you probably know the work of Daniel Pink and his work on motivation. People are more motivated by what's intrinsic. They're more motivated by being cared for. They're more motivated by how they feel. There's a Maya Angelou quote. People remember how you make them feel. I'm paraphrasing, but so when you treat your employees with dignity and respect, they want to do better. When they have purpose, when they have motivation that really is core to who they are, the performance comes. So it is about investing in your people in order to really get that performance, as you mentioned before, that complement of the two.
Brilliant. I think I really like the quote from Maya Angelou. I think that is so true. People would forget, what you said, but they would always remember the way that you make them feel. So that's a great place for us to thank you for the insights. Thank you for your amazing sharing and the reminders that the holy grail of performance is really through sleep, nutrition, and wellness. So thank you for that. It's amazing. Always pleased to have you on the show, and I look forward to welcome you again.
My pleasure, Robbie. So glad to be here.